especially seeing you all here, which is an emotional moment for us, actually. If somebody asks, what did it take in order to build the company through the years, all I'm going to do now is show them this picture that we're going to take in a little bit. Because to me, that solves that question and answers that question, the importance that all of you have had to what we've been doing and together is growing the company. And I see you all, and John has stories, and I've got stories about so many of you that has so much to do with not only playing the drums, but affected on what we did on how we made the drums. So we'll kind of hit on some of those ideas as we go around the horn here.
Well, when I think back of the time, well, we were all still here, and unfortunately some of us have passed away, and like the Larry Londons of the world, and there's a Keith Knutson and people like that sometimes my wife Esther this morning was saying, you got to remember all those folks too, and I don't think there's one of us who doesn't, Yeah. And so the heritage of the company, when I look back, is mired in the thought of, were you guys all crazy? We were, Don and I were just a couple guys, You could have had, these huge corporations backing you and, sending you free skidoos and all kinds of stuff. But
we went through that already.
Yeah, you did that. But there's a belief in the passion and the work that we did and the sound that we were trying to achieve, and you all believed in that, and we've all become a family. And of course, we don't see one another enough, but I try and get around to see people, or we have some times at the factory together, and there's always a drum set that needs to be built here, there, and everywhere. And when you come in to DW, be it the pedals, the new pedals that are being built are just like rocket ships, or some of the new drum shells and ideas and things. We were just saying to Bruce Becker, he says, I got my 12 by 20, and he says, I'm slamming this thing. It's just one of those deals. It's like the other night, I was with Steve Perkins over at the Rock Gods Award ceremony and I talked him into it, but man, he's great and everyone loves him. Jim Keltner.
Too, and I have my rock god here also. Burley Drummond.
Went to Burley Drummond.
And the year before, do you know who the rock god was? The guy who's rocking the drums that you gods are playing. John was a rock god.
I don't know why they gave it to me, but
I couldn't figure that out either.
What the good thing about that organization, if we can just talk for a second, is if you know about it or if you don't know about it, they celebrate the industry within. In other words, you could be a technician, you can certainly be a great musician, you can be an engineer, you can be a producer, you can be a lighting person, you can be a writer. And that's what I like about that organization, is because they really want to celebrate the people inside of it, not just the thing that you see on television. This is a really great organization run by Sandy Rizzo and Elizabeth, and I believe Buster's part of that too. So anyway, I saw some of us there the other night, and it's always good to run into you guys. I run into Rick Latham in Frankfurt often. It's like, I can't believe you're here because I thought you were in Milan.
Yeah, so, I thought I was.
Made a wrong turn.
So, I try and catch up with as many people as I can. I saw Ricky the other day, and it was fun and wonderful. We're talking about an exciting new thing. I haven't seen Jonathan Moffat for a long while, but, you see somebody at NAMM, and it's like, what? Oh, yeah, great. It's just there's so much going on at NAMM. And Jacob, I haven't seen forever, but it's wonderful to see you guys. Lou comes out every now and then. Tom, it's great to see you. And look there's John Ferraro right there. And Chad Wackerman and I are doing a gig together coming up on the 16th. At Bentley's Music. And I think this is going to be something really cool. And I hope that the right people film this thing or something. I don't know what they need to do.
Bring the right people.
It's going to be a lot of fun. And we're preparing for that now. So that's exciting. You know, and Richie comes out often, and, you know, the LP thing, he's always next door to me. When I hear this cajon just going nuts, Richie's here. So it's great that we have so many people that feel the need to drop by, not just because you need some gear, but you check in. You check in and make sure everybody's okay. And that's what family's all about, if you ask me.
We're looking at this group representing people who were drum artists that signed up in the 80s, which is interesting because we really didn't think of ourselves as a drum company in the 80s. Our accountant definitely didn't think of us as a drum company because we took every penny we made off of the pedals and we dumped it into this drum hole. But we were building something, and we knew we had something, and we knew we were filling a need, and that was kind of the most important part of building a company to me. I've never had a business background and thought about, you know, how successful could this be at one point, but what could we do to work together to improve the quality of lives of a drummer? And then you kept coming back to us saying, yeah, it works or it doesn't work. Jim's got a good story about the first time he took a double pedal that I made out on the road. And I said, I've got this one, and tell them how great that was.
I know this one.
Oh, you mean tell him?
The double pedal that exploded.
I didn't know we were supposed to tell things. Don said that he would make me a copy of this double pedal that I had been using. It was made by a company called Zaumer. And it just barely worked. But I loved it so much that I made it work. And so I said, Don, can you do a real one of this for me? And he said, oh, man, easy. The first 3 or 4 were disasters. And I was playing live with Bob Dylan on stages and stuff, you know. And like the last time, I would come back and I'd say, Don, this didn't work. I'd bring a little bag of the whole thing home. And he said, the last time he said, this one's going to work, Jimmy. This is it, man. We figured it out. So I was really, really confident. And about 8 bars into the first song on stage with people, like a big gig, the thing, I feel this sproing thing. It's like a sproing, and I saw things flying left and to the right, and it's like little screws and things, and that's when I figured, I came back to Don, and I said, Don, there's just too many things. It's too busy, man. There's too much stuff on it. And he said, you know what? We got it now. And he came up with a universal joint, and nobody looked back from that point on, man.
Yeah.
Terry Bozzio using like, 8 of them at one time, 6 feet that way.
The predecessor to working on that pedal with Jim was Chad, who had a drum tech at the time, who had made a version of a double pedal that screwed onto the bass drum. Remember? It actually had to attach it to the side hoop of the bass drum, which was good if you were a drum tech and you were dealing with your drummer and you were setting it up for him every night, but an average consumer wasn't going to be able to do that.
John was on that tour. That was the 82 Zappa tour in Europe, and that's where we met.
That's where we met.
Yeah, so we had this pedal. It was 2 DW pedals, and it had a bunch of U-clamps. It was like, Home Depot. And you had to, well, you remember it better than I do, but it had a bar that was twisted, so it would kind of fit. It looked like it was just a disaster, but it worked the whole tour. And it was fun because it was the first time, like in Europe, these drummers would see the Zappa show, and because Frank said, I don't want 2 bass drums. I'm not going to have, we recorded every night. He didn't want to have 2 open microphones because there was a lot of decibels coming out of the 3 guitar players, which were going into the drum mics. So only 1 bass drum, but he still wanted me to play certain things that were faster.
Double bass.
So this was having a double pedal. But then there were no double pedals. So I was playing some of this fast stuff. People were going, what? They thinking I had the world's fastest right foot. But it held up for the whole tour, and then really that was the thing that you guys.
Yeah, we had to take that and make it so the average consumer could buy it, make it so it was marketable, and then we got the patents on having plates under both sides of the double pedal, using it with the universal joint, and stepped it up. But kind of back to the original philosophy, I remember seeing Jim play this Zelmer Twin, and I went up and sat down and played it. I said, well, it's nice that you can do something with the left pedal and make a double pedal out of it, but the right pedal was just, you have to suffer through that. And he said, there's some things that he used it for, and I kept that in mind as we were designing the double pedal and came out with it. And education, from the educational standpoint, I tried to get people into looking at it as the difference between playing 2 single strokes or 2 double strokes with your right hand and your left hand. You're going to get a different sound out of your bass drum how you do that. It wasn't just for the train wreck at the end of the song, which is what a lot of people bought it and used it for.
I think it's called fanfare.
Okay.
I remember the point when John Good said, like, we've done it. We finally have it, because we were playing a gig. It was another Zappa gig, and we played the sound check. And I said to John, "Could you make the right side feel like the left side?" And that was it. John was like, "We've done it. We have the double pedal."
Yeah, back in those days, I'd say we were 80% there, but a guy's left foot wasn't near as good, so he didn't notice anyway. So now we've got it where I think they're both exactly the same.
Well, Chad, if you think about it, and Jim as well, Don was just sending us out like sacrificial lamb. Let's see if this blows up in front of 80,000 people. Anyway.
And John was you went out as a drum tech during the 80s, as a lot of you know, but a lot of the people watching this might not know.
Oh, and I was with Jonathan Moffat.
That was that was a huge part of the history,
Those were some
Victory Tour,
big time.
and then Madonna's
people would see.
Virgin Tour, and then Jermaine's
You got pedals
tour.
first.
That's
You were our
right.
first one of our Sugarfoot. That was the guy that was taking our pedal to the next level as far as
But he
us
wouldn't
marketing
play a
it.
double pedal.
Us marketing it. He didn't need to. That was my problem.
I kept telling him, I said,
Pedal's not for everybody.
"We
You
can
can
make
do.
this easier on you." And he goes, "No, I
No,
don't."
no. I'd see him play, and I'd say, "Oh, there goes that idea." But part of that history also was when you were playing. I think when you were out with Michael, and you did this phenomenal thing where you grab your cymbals behind you and play. Not good for drummers to do if they have elbow rotator cup problems, by the way, but you survived that.
Oh, lose digits on the hand.
Yeah, it was bad for your hands. But he came and said, "Don, the cymbals are swinging so much. Can you make them so that when I hit them, they don't swing so much?" And that was the idea of coming up with the adjustable clutch that would allow the cymbals to come back together. And why you ended up on the road was you were taking a lot of pedal. These people knew you as kind of a tech guy, and we never quite talked this out. So
No, I know where you're going with
$35 a week wasn't enough to keep you in town, right?
$35 a week, is what I made, and that doesn't leave a lot of room for a hotel or an apartment, but
You had a
food
motorcycle.
I had a motorcycle. It was kind of busted, and but I'll never forget. I think it was with Earth, Wind, and Fire, back in 1980. I think it was. And I said, because I would like do the edges on stuff. I remember telling Mark Pinsky, I think it was, I said, when I went to work with you, Chad, I said, "Yeah, I can flatten those edges out." And he looked at Pinsky and he goes, "He wants to make my edges flat? I know this guy knows something, but I don't know about that." Well, what I meant was on a flat plane. Anyway, but in 1980, we're just like, literally, I got $10 a week for food budget, right? And they said, so I would cut people's edges, and it was Freddie White, I think, at that time. Anyway, so, and I knew a little bit about tuning, so I'd give it back to them, and they go, "Man, these sound great. Could you come in the studio and possibly tune?" So, yeah. There's $100. I'm going, whoa, Jesus. And then finally he said, "Could you think about maybe taking a little leave of absence?" And little did I know it was like on the job, training to see what breaks. But, and they were going to pay me $400 and free T-shirts. So that's the way that kind of stuff got going. And, through all those things, I mean, some great things happened. And a lot of people, like, I'll never forget Josh Freeze. Remember, it was Phil Halsey, right?
Yeah, Phil
It was Phil Halsey.
introduced us. Yeah.
Brought him in, and I'm going in and out and doing stuff. And so it kind of got to be an exciting time because we were innovating as much as we could. Not that we have stopped one little bit. I mean, the pedals down all the way. But this was a really exciting time. And so here comes Josh. And how old were you? You're
12.
12 years
I figured I brought a picture that I found recently of Don and I at some function in '85 when I was 12, when I started, like you guys were kind enough to give me a pedal endorsement. And Don, we were trying to figure out where it was, but it was somewhere like in the marina. But all I remember about that night was Chad was there, and he had the new bass player from Men at Work. There was a new guy that was playing with you. Chad, were you playing with Men at Work? And I remember being so starstruck. The rhythm section from Men at Work was at this thing. That's all I remember of that night, really. But I brought you that photo tonight, or this morning.
That's so great to have.
Long time ago, man,
Classic.
85.
It's classic. It's classic. And Steve Perkins was the same kind of thing where Ted Gardner.
Yeah, Frank Zappa's tour manager.
Right. And you were
Men at Work.
And Men at Work's tour manager.
And you-
tour managed Jane's Addiction.
you were super young.
And I didn't know how to party correctly until I met Ted. My party technique was out of focus. He would focus, how to get it done right. Quickly. But he brought me up here. To Newbury Park.
That's right. That's exactly right. And things went from there. And what was interesting about it was a cherry drum kit, cherry stain kit. And you fell in love with that kit. I think you recorded with it right away. And it was just like, we were friends, number one. Number two, you loved that sound. And I try to keep supporting that sound of yours. And I'm proud of everything you've done. It's amazing to me. And so,
This feels good.
but there are guys like, I think it was John Ferraro, prior to that his drums were getting ready. I think was it Barry?
Yep.
It was a Barry
1980. We're in your apartment on Lincoln Boulevard putting together the tom-toms, ready to leave for a 10-month tour.
So we got screws and stuff, and oh my God. Man, it was Gary Zipperman was your
Gary
tech?
Zipperman, yes.
Yeah. See, I still got a little bit of
And
it.
you've got the 8x14 walnut stained snare
In
your
my
office.
office.
Yeah, I gave that
Yeah,
back to you.
that's
On
a
the
treasure.
power ballads. I know Don was talking about that earlier.
I often tell people the story when we're talking about things that are difficult for drummers to do that they wouldn't think are difficult to do. And one of the hardest things is to play a really slow ballad at triple forte. And that's when I have those memories of many of you seeing you play, and Buddy and Vinny and Steve and thinking of those times where Elvin Jones, you feel like you were there yesterday because you remember being it. And I remember being at a Manilow concert, sitting off the side, and he was playing this ballad that was you could drive a truck through 1 and 2. I think at the top of the chart, I think it's a quarter note equals August. And it was just like, but it was just it's speaking of John Ferraro, I'm giving it away, my lead here now. Companies pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to come up with changing their logo and coming up with names for things. And of course, for all the years, even through today, we're as frugal as we can be. And you just sit there and you do it yourself because you have no other choice. But we had just started making the chain drive pedal with the round sprocket. Started out making the nylon strap pedal, then we got the rights to make the chain drive pedal. Got a bunch of patents on that and improved it. But I needed a name for it, and we had just moved up here to Newbury Park, and John was out and was getting some pedals fixed, and I think maybe we had a double pedal, and I was carrying a box with him out to his car. I was saying, we're going to be doing an ad on this next week. I need to come up with a name. And you remember that? I set the box down on the back of his car, and he opened up the hood, and it said Volvo Turbo. I said, that's it. We're going to call it the Turbo pedal. and forever on, it's been called it. So you can send us an ad for an ad agency ad if you want. For all these years, we've used it as a Turbo pedal. And then another artist came out, and I don't remember who this was, but they came out in their Volkswagen van when we did the offset cam. So we had the turbo round. I needed a name for the other one. And he took his accelerator and made a DW footboard out of it in his car.
So it was David Williamson.
Okay. What a memory he's got. So there comes the accelerator. So if we need any more names and Scott's stuck, we'll just call you guys up and come up with whatever we need to come up with. Looking at you, thinking of the 80s and even before that, like I think John, I knew you as a teenager, probably earlier than anybody else here. I met Jim when I was 16, but we knew each other back even earlier in those days, playing around town together.
You know, I have my famous story is that we were at the record plant, which a lot of people have recorded here, and it was the old record plant where they have marble and glass, and it was just we were recording our first album, and I had a pearl fiberglass kit.
Tell everybody who that's with, because the people might
it was Oingo Boingo. It was our first.
These people know, I know.
It was our first A&M record, and we were in this place. And I started playing the drums, and of course, fiberglass and plastic and marble and glass are just, yeah, exactly. And I almost started crying. And I remember calling Don, you gotta help me. I gotta have a wooden set. He sent it over. I took it out of the box, and it you must have tuned it, because I was so freaked out and shaking, because it was our big deal. I threw up the drums, never retuned them, played the entire album, and they sounded great. And at the end of the thing, I'm like, at the end of the day, man, I didn't even touch the drums. So you must have tuned them.
Yeah.
And they worked in that room.
And you just changed heads last week.
I was going to touch my sound.
No. You know,
That was a good moment.
That is a good moment. You know, and Bruce, for example, we spent so many years with Freddie Gruber.
Oh, yeah.
And actually, you became kind of like you took his thing to another level, which is fantastic. But when did we make your first kit, 86?
86, I called up Don. I wanted to get some pedals. Because, I knew about the drums at Freddie's, but I didn't know that you were really making drums on a production level or, or making sets regularly. And I called up Don, and I remember very vividly. I said, Don, I'd like to get some pedals. My brother and I just signed with MCA. We're doing our first record. And Don said, we're making drums. I went, okay. And that was it.
I occasionally told some stories, but we were making some drums at those days.
Yeah, but that's
Production is a big word for drums at that time. I think it was 2 kits a
We were about
month.
as illegal as you could get.
Yeah.
We were
And Pat Foley with a cigarette spraying in the back of her.
smoking a cigarette. There was no internet to look that up, but it seemed to me that
It was
couldn't
a
be
red
right.
stain.
That's right. That red stain.
That was a
Yeah.
red stain
Perfect.
kit. I'll
You
never
had the
forget it.
Tama mount for the
Yeah,
toms.
we didn't have one,
I know.
so. And then Ricky came along with it was Tony, right?
Tony Moon, yeah.
Tony Moon.
Oh, yeah, Tony.
Do you remember Tony? And anyway, and Tony comes to me, says, I want this kit, and it's got to be this certain green. And I went, well, what green is he? He said, it's poison. It's the only way he could describe it. It was poison. And we did it, and it was really something, I thought.
It was. You said, how green do you want green to be? And I said, enough that when we're opening for David Lee Roth, they remember me and not their
There's the marketing side of Ricky there. Continues on.
I had been with Pearl, and they sent me a kit after I waited for 4 months, and the bass drum was an eggshell shape. And I went, this
Not
isn't gonna
intentionally.
work. Yeah, that was not acceptable. And Tony said, there's this guy and he does these edges, and I think they're making drums now, but I don't know. If not, we'll buy a kit and we'll do that. So I came out, I met both of you, and I was complimenting you because you had told me what you had teched for, and I had seen some of those shows, and I loved the drum sound. He thought I was bullshitting him. He's just sucking up to me, and the next thing I know, I said, I'd love to play these drums. I mean, I've never heard anything sound so damn good just right out of the box. And you guys both welcomed me on board right then. I was your first rock guy, I
Yeah,
think.
pretty close.
And or one of the, I mean,
And
you and
those-
I probably.
Those were those Santa Monica shows.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were the
6
Santa
and
Monica
6.
shows. I mean, that, and I've never looked back. So.
While
we
we're
thank
telling
you.
stories of putting edges on drums, I remember we ruined Jonathan's drum when he was with another company. When you trued up the edge so much, you came in and said, "Well, oops,
No
the
edge
tension
left."
rod, the tension rods all bottom out."
They were a little out, and the more you took it down, the more you took it down.
He took it down so much, he came in and says, "Well, I trued it up, it's perfect." I said, "That's great." He said, "But you can't tune it because the tension rod's all bottom out." I took it out about an inch. Anyway.
Oh, God.
So, but those things spurred us on to thinking that things could be done in a little different and a little better way, I think. And
There were times when, the characters in this room would come to visit and to get involved. Lou Molino, for example, he wanted these bombastic big drums, and you were playing with Trevor.
Yeah.
It was Trevor Raven, and I went down. And we've talked about this over lunch before, and I made this drum kit, which I thought I was pretty proud of. It was yellow, and I went to the Roxy to hear this, and I thought I could handle volume. I had no idea what was coming at me. Man, that was a loud night. You remember that?
I do.
And so to this day, Lou likes things a little different, right, Garrison? Just a little different, And the good side of doing all the things that I feel very proud of our team and the artisans across the street is that a little different is what we like to be challenged with, So.
You know what? I hate to interrupt. I brought powder coating to DW.
I think you did because it was.
Yeah, Jim Schaefer at Quality Powder Coating. I said, I want to powder coat all this hardware. Have you ever done it? No, I have a guy.
Yeah, we got a guy.
Now I started him.
We used him for a long time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Powder coating on the lugs and things.
Quality powder coating.
Yeah. Just reminded me of a story that they might not know in terms of how we got into the plastic-covered finish ply drums. So, John, pretty set in his ways sometimes. Olive Garden. It's good though. It's okay. I was he's got the best ears in the business, and no one tunes drum sets like he does. So I got to go along with it. But we were making lacquered drums at the beginning because that's what we had taken over from Camco, and we were only doing lacquer shells. We didn't have any covered shells, and that was going along. It wasn't a serious part of our company growing in 80, 81, 82, 83. We were doing single pedal, double pedal, remote hi-hat, cable hi-hat, anything you could make out of the parts that we owned. That's why we had to keep inventing other things that had something to do with the pedal, because we owned parts that had to do with the pedal. But after I started looking at the lacquer drums we were making, I realized we were putting a $100 bill in with most every kit that went out the door. So as opposed to wrapping it with plastic, which was really easy to do. Well, John was on the road again in the mid 80s. Forget which tour it was, but you were out for a period of time. Might have been with Jonathan. Coming back, and we had made like 2 or 3 drum sets, and I didn't want the guys to pick it up or for us to ship it until he tuned them. So they kind of stacked up in what was an office, which was actually an upstairs loft, totally illegal. You couldn't even stand up straight in it, if you remember.
I do.
When we had just moved up here. So Remo had just come out with a gloss black plastic back then that was like really shiny black plastic. So I got some of it from Remo, and I wrapped a shell, and that was the 4th kit for him to tune up in this kind of a dark little place where he was at. So he tuned the first 3 lacquer kits, and he tuned the last kit, and everything was good. So he comes in and I said, "We can ship them all, right?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "They all sound good." I said, "Yeah." I said, "How'd the black gloss one sound, the one at the end?" He said, "That sounded great." I said, That was plastic coating, John."
Plastic,
and you
yeah,
put your head in your
yeah.
hands and said, "You got it."
The beginning of
I immediately called our accountant and I said, "Don't give up on us yet. We have a light at the end of the tunnel here."
when we started, though, speaking of a little bit of plastic, we made these paper shells. They were wound paper like
That was what the seats were made out of. They were trying to
that's
make
what
the
seats were
adjustable
made
trap
of.
case
So
seat.
we were trying to make these paper shells. I think Burley might remember some of this stuff, but
John remembers sweating through them.
I remember sweating through the
seat.
the
They
thrones.
would, they would shrink.
They would
collapse.
sweat. They would sweat, and then the paper would come up more.
so we made these. We said we can make a drum set out of this, and so we were going to the NAMM show to our 10 by 10, and at that time it was in the garage structure of the Disneyland Hotel.
Yeah.
And we had our little booth, and I was up all night because we couldn't get this thing right, and I wrapped it with that white plastic, and I finally got it done, and it was like the sun's coming up, and I'm going, God, it's terrible. So Don picks it up, and he goes, you forgot the snare bed. And I went, oh, geez. And so we cut in the snare bed, sent it down there. We all get down there, set up the drums, and the first day they looked great.
Then they started warping.
And then the
By
second
day 3, we had to pull them all
they
away.
looked like a little old man,
This was the idea was I was trying to make the most affordable drum set you could, so every kid could start out playing drums, and so we thought this would be an inexpensive way to do it. And then immediately, as we tried this, which we tried for a short period of time, another part of that story was in order to make it at least hard enough so that you could put fittings on it, you had to dunk it in what's called a phenolic resin, and then bake it. So I'd heard about that, and there's no internet, so I'm not Googling this. You're just reading books and hearing about it from other people. So I dunk it in, I take it home, I put it in my oven at 220 to bake it, and then I call the guy that sells me the resin, and I say, how long should I be, baking this for, that I soaked my shell in it, that we talked about what you gave me the resin for. And he said, probably about 40 minutes. He said, okay. I said, I've got it in my oven. He said, you have it exposed to an open flame, it will explode. I immediately knew I was about to kill myself. So we just said, we're going to make the best wooden drums in the world. And that's what's kind of got us started along those roads.
That's what got that going.
What ideas, thoughts any of you have that you could think of that was the first time you heard or saw a DW kit or a story that would go along with that?
Well, you guys were in Gardena at that point, right?
78, 79, yeah.
Yeah. So I remember coming to that location, and there were those phenolic shells, but I wasn't, keen on that idea. I was like, okay, that's kind of interesting. But then,
that was for a different,
the
different thing altogether, yeah. And in Gardena, one of you, the person who I'm going to be telling the story about will certainly know what it is, but we were making pedals in 78, 79, just the regular single strap pedal, and somebody came to me with a drawing on a napkin and said, I've got a way you could take a pedal and hook up a cowbell to it. And I said, well, that's not our business right now. I said, we don't have any money to do any new tooling. I can't do anything with that. Probably should be more with a percussion company. Richie, tell me that story again.
Well, when I came to LA at the time, Phil Halsey was the one that brought me. From Chicago, was my first endorsement was Slingland, and he saw me playing. Slingland had made some Congo drums in those days of fiberglass, and I was playing them, and I had built this contraption to play cowbell with my foot. So I thought about the idea, and I brought it to you. And at the time, you said, well, we're not in that kind of line of business, whatever. So I took it, and he said, I don't know if many drummers would play this thing. And then I went to Martin Cohen at LP, and they built it, and just about every drummer uses it now. Unfortunately, now you own the company.
Now we're back to making it again. It all happens in full circle. Any other stories when you first saw a DW kit or made you think about playing it? Yeah.
Well, I've got a story about the first time I realized how successful you guys were becoming and how great the company was growing. Which I got, I started playing with pedals in '85, but I got my first kit. Phil brought me up, got a kit in '88. So we went up to, Rancho Conejo, Newbury Park, and got the kit. I remember doing a gig at the Whiskey around that time, and the sound man putting the microphone in the kick drum, the sound check, and he goes, wow, DW drums. Wow, I've never seen a DW kit, because it was still a boutique thing. It was this small club. And I said, oh, you play drums? He goes, no, I play guitar, right? But this is amazing. And I was going, wow, this is really cool, right? So cut to a couple years later, I'm playing my first time at Universal Amphitheater, right? And I was playing with a band, and we were the headliner. And I kind of waltzed in like, yeah, okay, I'm pretty young, playing Universal Amphitheater. I thought I was kind of
hot shit, right? And I got my drum set up there, and I'm really, really excited. I got my DW drums, and I walk in, and there's 2 other risers on the side of the stage with the opening band's gear, whoever the opening bands were, right? I'm thinking, and they're both DW drum sets. And I'm like, it was that moment of like, your favorite band that only you in a small club of people knew about is now becoming huge, and it's that thing of being on kind of the fence of going, God, am I bummed that this is now for everybody? Or am I really excited and happy for these guys?
That was the other 2 kits we had made.
Yeah, exactly. But it went from the guy at the whiskey, the guitar player going, oh my God, I've never seen one, to, oh my God, I guess everyone's got them now. It's probably like in 91, but then I went, for about 30 seconds, I went from not feeling so elite to going, you know what? This is supposed to happen this way, and getting to watch you guys go from a boutique tiny company to, the world's leading drum manufacturer is pretty exciting and special. And thank you for everything you guys have done.
Well, thank you very much. Curly drumming there's a interesting thing the phenomenon. Now with Ambrosia, way back then.
Well, you made a kit, and the first time I got to play it, I think it was 81 or maybe 82. I shipped it to London to work with James Guthrie, and you had this strange. It had 5 toms, but 4 of them were on one stand. So it was like a 10, 12, 13, 14.
That was Don.
On one stand.
That was my favorite. Was that a good thing?
So it was like play. It's like they were right in your face. And nobody could see you play. But so working with James, and James Guthrie was so blown away with the sound of the drums that halfway through the session. All these English drummers, like Simon Phillips, shows up. He's on the phone calling all these drummers to come down and hear these drums. So I'm doing the session with 5 of the top English drummers watching me. Thanks, John.
That's why you're a rock god, Burley.
That's why you're a rock god. And I'll tell you something. The most amazing part of that is back when I was in high school. I went to school in Lugano, Switzerland. And they had this guy who had a bit of an English accent, but I don't think he was really English. He just lived in England or something. Anyway, but he was a good-looking guy. Ladies loved him. His name was James Guthrie. And so, we were friends casually, and that was 72, I guess. And so he left. And went on. I never found out what happened to him. So it turns out that I met a guy named Gary Wallace, and Gary Wallace with Pink Floyd, and he was working with Nick Mason and a Momentary Lapse of Reason thing. So this is years later, and so Gary, who's become a family friend and an incredible, great DW artist. He was working with Paul Davis, who was like a drum tech. And so he brings him over to our house, and they said, well, we're going into town to go to this guy's studio. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, it's this James Guthrie. And I go, it can't be the same guy. And so then they get there to his studio, and they're going, so he's going, where are you guys staying? Or where are you staying, Paul? And he goes, at this guy named John Good's house. And he goes, it can't be. Can't possibly be. And then it turns out that it was him and it was me. And he gets on the phone with me, and all we could talk about was how we actually must have met is through you.
Oh, wow.
So it was something. The guy left high school and went on to produce The Wall with Pink Floyd. Wow. Yeah, so it's just funny how, as Richie Hayward would say, it's funny how small this world is, but I wouldn't want to paint it. So.
Speaking of producers, when we did our second album, Open Up and Say Ah, Tom Werman had just finished the Motley Crue record right before us. And we had a production meeting with him. And he said, listen, this is how I'd like to do the drums. We want to have triggered pads, and then live cymbals and, you know, da 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 da. And he said, we just did Motley Crue like that. And I said, I don't want to do that. I have drums that sound really good. And we went back and forth, and finally he said to me, he goes, okay, I'll give you half a day. If we can't make it sound right, we're going to do it my way. Needless to say, it's a DW kit on that album. And I think that changed the way he thought about acoustic drums after that.
Producers
never
were some-
used a trigger on a Poison record ever. I've never triggered anything.
Producers were some of our, and engineers, some of our biggest artists. That was our artist relations department, really. We didn't have one per se back in those days.
And that's when I met Peter
Yeah.
Wolf.
Yeah.
And Peter says,
Yeah, Peter.
he goes,
I'm the oldest guy here.
Peter said, I've got to have one of these drum kits.
Yeah, I have to say, I'm probably in the midst of all these incredible drummers. I'm the only piano player who has an endorsement with DW.
You had to sign one musician.
We needed to hear.
Yeah, no, I
No,
Tell a story.
But, but the thing was, you know, after my 4 years with Zappa, I started to become a session player, and then, you know, since I could read and write, I would be a arranger, and then all of a sudden I started producing. And whenever I produced somebody, the drummer of the band would come in and they would say, you know, no, I'm endorsed by Pearl or Selma or whatever. And I worked with this guy, who would rent drums, right? And whenever he brought in some drums, it was always DWs. And this was like early 80s. And we would put mics on his drum set and on the DWs, and DW would always win out. It was very simple, you know, 81, 82. So it got to the point where I called John and said, you know what? I gotta buy a set because it's like I don't want to go through renting it all the time. The guy is way too expensive, and if I have a great drum set, we'll use it all the time. So we started with that, right?
That green drum kit.
No, it was like before that. It was a natural set.
Oh, yeah.
Then was
one
I
you
went
just-
through so many drum sets in the meantime, and the last drum set. Now my house just burned down in Malibu, and we lost the whole studio and
Did you
everything.
lose
But I
that
had
API console?
No, I had
so beautiful.
No, that API console I sold. I bought a huge Neve. Then that Neve, since we were on the ocean and all the salt air, so after 2 years of Neve, you would go and every switch was. And I said, that's it, and I sold the Neve, and now I have a glorified mouse. One of those M6 consoles, right, which is basically nothing that you can't do with your computer mouse. So. But anyway, so that was the situation with why DW came into my life, because it always sounded so much better than anything else.
They record beautifully, without a doubt. That's
And effortless and no problem.
Yeah, they're easy to tune. I grew up in Chicago, and Slingerland was about a mile and a half from my house. So I started out. Obviously, you've all heard of Frank's Drum Shop, and we used to have drum kits of like a Ludwig bass drum, Slingerland snare drum, Gretsch toms. It was really cool, and Rogers Hardware.
There you go.
And so the first two Chicago records I did were with Rogers, Dynasonic, and just beautiful drums with calf heads. And so I remember, once the band kind of made it, I went to Slingerland and I said, I want to play your drums. And they said, well, who are you? And I said, okay, kid, we got Buddy Rich. And they were like, I was like, but I wanted to be, because Gene Krupa was my main first guy, and then Buddy. So what I'm getting at is I had this American culture, drum culture, which is really and so in the late 70s, Slingerland, it fell by the wayside. It was really pretty sad. So I signed with a Japanese company to get some free keyboard gear. right? And I got a bunch of people, but I got to be honest, the drums sounded like utter shit. They sounded like they were horse shit. We want names. So they're better now, but because they're better because of these guys. But so I told my drum tech, I said, I don't want to stay with this company anymore. And he said, DW's making drums. And I was playing their pedals, and I was friends with Don, and I hadn't gotten to know John real good. So I went to the Newbury Park, which was about this size, and I played on their drums, and I said, can I say fuck? These things sound that's my sound in a really deep tones, melodic. And these guys they're just as crazy as me. They're as passionate about making drums as I am about playing them. And it's an American company. I wanted to get back to an American company. I haven't looked back since. It's really been a pride for me to be a part of you guys. And
thank you,
and
Dan.
you've always, and kind of as a little side note, when I left Chicago and I was in exile for like 15 years, didn't play much, John sent me one of the first exotic. He knew I was really down, and he sent that to me, and it just lifted me.
Well,
I still had those,
Yay,
so
Danny.
yay to you guys.
Yay,
Thank you.
Danny. We want to talk about exotics, so just for 2 seconds, and Peter, you can't say anything. But he got wind that I had all these exotic woods, and I was really stretching and exploring and et cetera, et cetera. So Peter Wolf drives up in this Rolls Royce, and he says, "Come on, man. Can't you do the dashboard? Can't you?" We wound up doing his car.
Oh, Peter. I turned to John and said, "John, we're in the wrong business here somehow. I got my Ford
the lacquer
Volkswagen.
is so beautiful." And then there's a time when, like, for example, when Jacob, when you and your dad came,
Right.
and that was a phenomenon right there. It was so you were 7 years old.
Yeah, 7, 8, something like that.
Yeah.
Your dad playing accordion? Yeah, he still jams on that thing.
Wow, wow.
I went and see. You owned a club. I went and saw. Your mom was a singer.
We were there.
We were there together. Yeah. I think Jim. I think you went
Kellner
once. Didn't
was
you go
there.
to see Jacob with his mom and family? We
I
went
think
to see him too.
we ate
And I think you
great
were
that
6 or
night.
7. Yeah. I thought the classic comment was this. They take a break. They're coming back, and his mother, who's the singer, is supposed to open up the next set. And they're all sitting there, and she isn't there. And here this little 6-year-old kid says, "Where's the girl singer?" This kid's a pro. He knows exactly what's going on, right?
One of the funniest Jacob moments for me was when sitting next to Freddie Gruber, and he looks at me and goes, "Yeah, all the kid needs is a good bio and a great divorce."
Well, you got the bio. You grew up fine without the divorce.
50 and strong. Killing it, man.
So we were hanging out last night, and I had Larry Aberman and Billy Ward and Mike Clark, and we were reminiscing about when Larry contacted us you were doing a show with Nile Rodgers.
Yeah.
And he says, "John, I got this gig, and it's going to be great. It's going to be a TV show." Larry, tell us how that thing went down.
Oh, God. Well, the first thing I really wanted to say was, how much did the 2 words timbre matching change your life?
Yeah.
And really, when I came in and got with DW, it was Carla Azar. I was in New York, and there was no such thing as DW drums in 1989. And Carla hooked me up because she told me about the personal nature and the family nature and the earthiness of the drums. And that's all I wanted to hear, because I kept running into what you're talking about, the eggshell drums off the shelf and all. And I sat with John, and we got the deal. But are you talking about the drums came and the show closed?
Yeah.
It was we had
Perfect
this
timing.
great TV show, and I got to do a lot of great work with Nile back then. But we did this TV show, and I did about 10 shows with all these different artists. Every week we were playing with. And the last show we were playing with, it was on VH1, and we played house band with an artist, and then they would play a video of the artist, and we played with John Hyatt. I think you played drums on that record. And it was perfect day, you know, John Hyatt's here. We're all dressed to the nines. The drums came, they rushed them in next day, and it was a big deal. DW drums in New York, all this stuff. I get there, the drums are there, and the producer says the show's closing. And I had to call John and tell him that, but we did this Hyatt show that was unbelievable.
And that's where Artie Smith wound up with that kid, I think.
Yeah, oh no, Artie Smith ended up with Johnny's silver DWs. Do you remember those?
Yeah, that's
was
right.
that the kid that was in the studio?
Yeah.
Now, do you remember what happened to that kid?
That went to Woodstock and it got
Green
muddy.
Day.
Yeah.
Artie
Green Day.
Smith had my drum set when I came out here. He kept that drum set in New York. So when I had something, and also he said, you know, I don't have any DW drums, so the DW drummers can use the drums. And Green Day had a gig at Woodstock in '94, and they said, Artie called me and said, well, Green Day needs a DW drum set. Is it okay if they use your kit? No, they're gonna. If anything happens to them, they'll take care of it. You know. Well, if anyone watched Green Day in '94, it was a mud bath. And those drums got creamed. They sent them back to the shop, and you took the best part of this story in true punk fashion. I was taking a Southwest to Sacramento, and there's Trey, cool, with the singer Billy. Yeah, Billy, and he's standing right next to me. I don't know him at all, and I said, hey, remember those silver drums at Woodstock that got all effed up? And I thought, you know, it's a nice bonding moment. I said, those were mine. And he went, I said, you're punk rock, dude.
So at that time, we were talking about that at a PAS show. I think that's where I met Mike Clark, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, we fell into a friendship that was pretty quick, and Mike was doing a lot of great work, and we were talking about that last night, and then it kind of moved because Billy was there with us last night, and I'll never forget that Billy came on board, and it was a big thing. It was the resurgence of that band, the Knack, and I thought, oh, come on, the Knack. But you played the shit out of the Knack, you know, and so we were sitting there. He was playing me the demo tape in his pickup truck in the parking lot in
Toyota
Newbury
pickup
Park.
truck.
And
AM radio.
And he came in and he says, you know, some guys sit down and they gotta move. The cymbal stand can't be there, and he just sat down and just killed me on this kit. So we became friends, and so we said, you know what, let's go on the road and do these seminars, you know, like it's kind of a show, but a clinic. And so we decided to go get this thing off the ground, and we left for the road on September 10th, 2001.
Oh, God.
And man, oh man, we you know, the world changed the next day. But we wound up driving everywhere because we were supposed to fly, and we had 12 cases of excess baggage drum gear. That wasn't going to go over good, you know. Anyway, so
we
wound up in a
took
car.
a cab from Pittsburgh to Ohio.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, crying in the car, you know, talking to my wife. It's like
It was horrible.
Oh my God.
We always we bonded really well, and we just both loved the Beatles, and we were just jonesing for some Beatles music. And every truck stop we stopped at, they didn't have the Beatles. So finally, we're in this one truck stop, and it's like the Beatles, the original artists. You know, it's a cassette. I got it up, and I'm walking up to the cashier, and Billy goes, "Put that back." I was in the original artist. So anyway, but those are some times that, you know, I can't ever forget. You know, and Fred, tell us a little bit about, you're coming in right around the same time as Ricky, right?
Ricky brought me in.
That's right.
So we were at the same place before, and we had toured together. Yeah, no names mentioned. We had toured together, and Ricky called me and was raving about these drums. You have to check them out. And I'm thinking, yeah, drums are drums. You know, it's this. And he said, really, really check them out. So then you guys called. I called you, and then we started having a conversation about the drums. And you said, let me just send you a kit. And it was a 22 and a 10, 12, 14, 16, I think. And I remember it blue. And I put it in the basement, and I had a whole recording thing. And from the first time I hit them, I couldn't believe what they said, just out of the box. That was my biggest thing, is this is out of the box, you know. And they were phenomenal, better than anything I'd ever played or heard drum-wise in my life. And it's all of a sudden, I'm a great engineer. Look at that. Holy cow. So, and really, it was Ricky who just raved and raved and raved and said, you just have to, just do it. You won't be sorry, you won't be sorry. So we were getting ready to go on tour, and I had no idea what I was going to do. And I was going out with the old drums on this tour. We were in New York City, and I go to this music store upstairs, and this guy that has the hair like this, talking like this, hey, how you doing? Hey, how you doing? Marco, hey, and he goes, hey, you guys are playing tonight, right? And tomorrow night. And I go, yeah. And he goes, you just signed with DW, right? And I go, yeah. And he goes, you like this kit? And I had a 28 and a 12 and a 14, 16, 18.
Huge. Yeah.
Huge. And he goes, hold on one second. You like this kit? And I was like, I think, no, you like this kit. I said, okay. So he goes in the bank, he goes, give me a second. And he gets on the phone, and he's gone for 20 minutes. Okay, it's yours. I just talked to them. They're going to give you this kit. So my first kit came off of the showroom floor, which was in the window. And he goes, we're going to get you a cab. We're going to get to this thing. We were playing Nassau Coliseum. And he sends out this kit. And I literally made the change in the middle of a tour. And that 28, my bass drum was an eighth note behind the whole night. It's unbelievable. But that kit,
that's great.
It's still my favorite kit, and that was the first
You
one.
know, there's these stories like, one time I'll never forget, Sheila E. was playing what we used to have Drum Day LA, and it got kind of taken over by Guitar Center. But that was Don's baby, and it was his idea. And
we had other artists. We had one DW artist and two artists from other companies.
Right, exactly.
Because we realized we couldn't pay for everything, so we had to get the other companies to come. We did clever things back in our day to make it all work.
But Sheila E. was going to be the artist, and she got deathly ill. She really came down with something. And so I made a phone call to Joey, and Joey says, I can put a little something together. And remember, it was down at the House of Blues.
Oh, wow. Forgot about that.
You forgot about that. And he comes on, and you made an announcement. I know Sheila was supposed to be here, and I'm sorry she's not feeling well. But we're going to try and fill in for her because my pal John Good called me, and that's why I'm here. I'll be here in a minute.
And brought the house down.
That was one of those magic.
I had Alex Acuna and Luis Conte were in the band with me.
Quite a band.
So I was on drums, and Luis was on conga, Alex was on timbal, and I got a bass player who, what was his name? He's a big lumberjack guy. He loved rifles and shooting. Oh shit! One of you drummers might remember him. And he moved. I think he moved to Nashville because you can shoot a lot of guys. And yeah, so that, and I think Tommy Lee was on the bill.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But
it was with Pearl at the time.
You saved my ass,
that was so many
but you
years
blew
ago.
everybody away.
It was somebody sent some sort of little video clip. I think it's 30 seconds long with the three of us ripping it up. If you find it, let me know, because I hear it's out there floating around.
It's floating
on YouTube.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, and I think about back in those days, and I'd always had a friendship with Tris and Bowden, and Tris would he's working with Kenny Loggins, and we were just we'd always bump into each other at SIR. And over and over and over again. And for one point, I think Jonathan and I rehearsed there for like 8 weeks or 13 weeks or something for a tour that lasted 5. But yeah, right. But Tris was always there, and so we finally got together, and that was a magic time for myself and Tris. We've become tightest of friends since then, and I appreciate everything. And it was always like you just got a new kit not long ago.
Yes.
Because he's really got kind of really feeling like getting back into like intimate settings with, you know, with a smaller kit.
Yeah. I have been sort of driving a monolith with the former band I was with, and actually trying to cover my buddy Danny Serafin down there. Incredible drumming, and try to make it sound authentic, and that for me required a whole lot of drums. And so now I'm back down to like, you know, a couple of toms on the bass drum and a floor tom. And oh, my shoulders are so grateful.
But it's killing. It's working. That little kit is you know, and it's kind of like Fish. When I first met with you, you had that car that was about 9,000 pounds. Remember that? It was mint green.
Oh yeah, you've always given me about everything I ever wanted. Mint, snare, wood, metal combination, whatever.
And that's you. You were in such a the scene he was in. I wasn't aware of till I heard it was Fishbone, and so far ahead of themselves. But I'll just never forget the magic of seeing you play those drums. It was great.
Thank you. Thank you guys for helping me to have help me to find my audible identity. Thank you.
Audible identity. Yeah, Rick.
I don't know if you remember this, man, but when did you guys move to Newbury Park?
81, actually.
Okay, I moved here in 84, and I came out there one time. I think I had met you guys at a NAMM show or something, and Don, we got to talking. You knew me from my book or something. And I went out to Newbury Park and looked at some drums, and I think I took a pedal or something that day, and wasn't really endorsing DW, but then later on I started working. I moved here in 84, I started working a little bit in the 80s. And I was doing a movie, and Quincy was producing, and I was doing the music for this dance movie, break dance. And I called you, and you sent me a drum set. Nick Ceroli's son delivered it to my house.
Yeah.
And it was one of John Guerin's drum sets that you told me. And it sounded so great, I actually stole the kit. I called John and told him, I've been looking for that. That was my first. I'm not going to send this kit back to you. But I took it to the studio. It sounded so great. And I still have the kit. You refinished it because it was like burnt orange or some kind of, and it was all. You saw me in a club later playing the kit. That's the only kit I had at the time, and it was cracking. So this is before you guys refined all the finishes, and it was cracking. It had been out in the sun. One drum looked kind of red, one looked kind of orangish, light color. John said, "You got to let me finish that. you got to bring that back. You can't be playing that like that." And I brought it back. You guys refinished it and made me an 8. It was a 22, a shallow 22, which was great. 10, 12, 14 had the old rims on it. The very first Geiger rims.
Way back then.
I had you make me an 8 and a 16, but I still have that kit, and it's my favorite drum kit. I have several beautiful kits that you guys have made for me. That one is special.
That was a Santa Monica as well.
Yeah. Speaking about guys that have passed, too, John. That's
John
it's a real
Guerin.
treasure to have that drum.
John Guerin's story, great drummer. You should all look him up out there. Everybody watching, good friend back in the day too. And it reminds me of how inspirational, even though we talk about these things as interactions we've had with you guys, but through the years, as you're building a company, you have your ups and downs. And I never had doubts about us being successful, but I had doubts about how long it would take and how you would get there. And these little words of encouragement, which are just like, hey, you got something and it worked, this worked. When Danny called and said, I want to play an American drum set, you know, major band, Chicago in those days. Here we are in our little loft up there and making people think we're a big drum company because somebody's switching from a major brand, you know, over to us. I do remember you said, the problem is I've got all this recording equipment, so I thought that was a nice part of the car. I said, yeah, I got a car and I got some clothes, and I said, I didn't connect the two immediately that's what he got from his previous company. So, but he didn't care about that. He wanted to change anyway. But those kinds of things, I know for me personally, kind of spurred you on, if you will, to the next level. And the John Guerin story was he calls me up one night, phone rings about 10 o'clock, and you have your answering machines back in those days, and usually something's wrong. I pick it up and it's John. He says, I just had to tell you this, Don. I do this orchestra date regularly, monthly, full orchestra. Been doing it for years, and I had my new DW kit down there for the first time. And when we took a break, the first violinist, woman first violinist, has never sent a word to me, never paid any attention to me. We're on two different planets. Walked by the drum set on the break and said, those drums sound good. He said, to me, that was like, she said she's never talked to me in 3 years, and that's the only thing she's ever said. I thought that's one of the ultimate compliments kind of you could get.
Do you remember?
And John and I growing up too, we were, you know, thinking we were doing pretty well as teenagers, playing around town, and then all of a sudden we heard about this guy who we had to have known about because he was playing so well, and he was about our age, Joey Heredia. Yeah. And it's like, you didn't start playing until you were a little bit, how old were you when you started playing drums?
I got a Slingerland kit on my 16th birthday. 16,
so we're 17 with 5 years into it, and this guy is like playing for a year and like wasting us, you know? It's just like, it was amazing. That was kind of the thing, where he couldn't, and you lived in LA, it's like, what has he been doing for the last 4 years?
From the People's Democratic Republic of East LA.
Yeah. And you keep it going.
You know, and Jim Varley, who's become over the years an incredible friend of ours and a lot of history with the company, I think you get the award for keeping the same gig for so long.
Yeah, that's yeah. 2 and 4.
2 and 4
on the snare drum.
Done right, though.
Done perfect.
And it's beautiful because, you know, after all this time, we've become really great friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, he came over and watched a football game with me the other day. Yeah. And I just love those kind of things. You know what I mean?
I'll be over next Monday, by the way.
Yeah, if you make sure you get there. And but it's like having all of these experiences, you know, from top to bottom. I will never forget, you know, people like Jimmy DeGrasso, who was over there, you know, at that time it was wine tea, right?
Wine tea.
And how in the heck did we get that going? I mean, it was like a revelation to get ourselves. You were playing the pedals first, I believe.
So I have to have Billy translate. My hearing is so bad.
That's really
like, what?
Maybe it's time for some in-ears. Anyway.
Question was, when did you first find out about DW drums?
Well, I'm sure it was Olive Garden, I'm sure. So many times I had interaction. You probably don't remember half the stuff because it's going like so far back. There was before I even knew John. Before I moved to California, I used to manage a little drum department in a little town in Pennsylvania, and I bought one of the first DW double pedals when they had the sort of like the L-arm secondary beater.
Oh yeah.
And because like I got tired of schlepping 2 bass drums around, and I remember I I broke something, I bent a linkage or something like that, so I looked on the back of the box and there was a phone number, right? So I called up this phone number, and this is when you were at the first place on Bernoulli, I believe. And I called up and I said, hey, I'm just calling, and I was like 19 or 18 at the time or something like that. And I'm like, I got a double pedal and I think I broke something. And Don, I got Don on the phone. And I'm like, yeah, I'm calling because I broke my pedal. He's like, what? Yeah, I think something's bad. He said, well, what happened? I'm like, I don't know. He goes, well, we can't have that. And I'm like, okay. He goes, what's your address? And I'm like, it's like little town in Pennsylvania. And like literally 3 days later, a new linkage showed up at my house. Wow. And I'm like, okay. And this is, customer service is often like an oxymoron, and I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. And then a couple years later, I remember, and John, you probably remember this, I wasn't even playing DW drums, I was playing, I don't want to talk about it. Anyway, so I was playing another right? I'm not giving anyone any free press. But I remember we were doing, and this is when MTV used to play music videos, and I hired this guy who did a lot of famous drummers at the time drum sets to paint my drum set, and he didn't finish it. He just put a lacquer on it, and then he left the country due to some unusual circumstances. And I happened to be talking to either Don or Chris, and because we were shooting a video in LA that weekend, so I had a drum set with no clear coat on it. And I think Don said, well, bring them down here. We'll clear coat, we'll paint them, we'll finish painting them. They're not even our drums. And I remember driving up to pick them up on like a late Friday afternoon. We had a 6 o'clock call on Saturday morning, and we took all these drums that had just been fresh clear coated back to the Holiday Inn off Roscoe. Ouch. Right? So me and the roadies were building drums on the 6th floor of the Holiday Inn at like 1 a.m, and the whole floor smelled like lacquer. And we're like, you guys, you're gonna get thrown out of here. It was like, well, whatever, we're building drums. So I said, okay, so build the drums and don't touch them because they're still tacky. And like I said, and this is before I even played DW drums, so you guys went to the extra mile before I even played the drums. And then I remember when I was playing the pedals, Chris Lombardi was doing inside, he was doing my artist stuff at the time, and he goes, we make drums too. And I went, oh, okay. And I just remember like doing some session, and John, you sent this red, God, I wish I knew where this kit went because it sounded great. This was it was a double bass kit with 224s, and this was like, this is 1987 or 88.
Yeah.
And I used it at a session down at Sunset. And you just sent this down, and that's why I wound up playing DW drums, because they sounded so good, and I really wasn't that familiar with the drums at the time. So it's sort of like wow, I got to get some more of these, and that's kind of it just kind of kept going from there, and then
Well,
it's always been great though. It's just
and we've had such a great relationship with you, and as many of us here. It's about the drums, it's about the pedals, it's about the company and stuff like that. But then you come to my home, or you go to Don's or something like that, and we all go have dinner. It's like with Tom Mendola, not long ago, we all went out together, and you talk about relaxing and just telling stories and sharing stuff with one another. I mean, I cherish those times.
I have a story that I never told you.
Uh-oh.
Just to give you guys a little background, at 13 I started playing professionally around New York City. And in the early days when I was recording demos, you used the house kit. And it was all taped up, you know, there was no resonance, and it was tweaked in the booth. And I had played a bunch of different drums, and I remember Campco. I remember seeing Campco. So I didn't get out here until '87, and DW was not on my radar. And I would go to some of those stores in New York City where they had drums, and a friend of mine ran the drum sales at Manny's. But I don't recall seeing DW.
No.
John and I were put together by a former student of mine when I came out here, and I really, at that point, I hadn't heard of really or played DW drums. I was more interested, if you recall, in the hardware. And there was something in that conversation, that first conversation we had face to face, and we were discussing drum manufacturing, things that I really didn't know anything about, which you educated me on. And you said, let me build a kit for you. And there was something in that conversation that made me trust you. And I think that's, you know, really where the relationship came. It came with trust. So still, I hadn't really heard the drums. I don't recall in Newbury Park a set up or anything like that.
Oh, there was one up in my loft.
Okay.
They came and went.
Right. I don't think there was one that day, because I don't
sold them as
remember
quickly as
playing
I
one.
could.
Right. So then we had another phone conversation. I just decided, okay, and you said, come on over and we're going to pick out the shells, which was like drums, you know. Got to tap shells now. Right. So I'm going, okay. But I remember you pulled out this 20-inch bass drum hoop, and you hit it, and you went, listen to this. And I went, whoa. And I wanted a 22. And you said, no, take this shell, take this shell. So, okay, so fast forward several weeks, and I came out and picked up everything was in boxes, and I was teaching that day. And I had him downstairs. I was in my first townhouse when I first got out here. And I had two advanced students, I remember this, and one guy came down, and I was finishing his lesson. And then another guy came in, and they were both there, and they saw the boxes. So forget about the other guy's lesson. They wanted to take the drums out of the boxes. So I said, okay, you know, let's do it. And we started setting them up. And I remember I hit the snare drum first. And I remember holding my breath for a second, because I was like, whoa, you know, this is really resonant. And up until that time, you know, before that, I had a Japanese maker's kit, and I took the bottom heads off, you know, all of this other stuff.
Oh,
It
shame
just
on
wasn't
you.
happening. And I remember going, how am I going to control the sound on these drums? And then I realized I don't have to. Because what I did was the first gig I did with them, and I didn't even want to move them because they look so beautiful. But those two students were like just so enchanted with these drums.
Oh, that's great.
It was great. So I took them, I was doing a show at the Shrine. And I remember we had the 20-inch, and I was still, is this drum gonna cut it? And I didn't have any muffling in it. And I played it wide open, and it was great. And that was it, you know, and after that, you know, whenever you said, hey, I gotta try this new thing, and I said, okay. let's
You were
check it
game
out.
for a lot of cool things.
Yeah, I remember that. But that was really, I think, what the theme of this is that I don't think any of us would be here if we didn't trust you, and you too.
You know, John, that's one thing I always wanted to say. I always used to. I've always called you the Steve Jobs of drums. You know.
That's good. A few zeros
sort of
missing,
funny,
but that's the idea. Yeah.
No, but the idea from that company was that we're going to build stuff to make your life better, not just for the sake of computing. We want this to be part of your life. And you've always made drums to make drumming better, not just to put an ad in a magazine or say we have this ply or we're doing this or to compete with another company. It's always been about the drummer first. And that's why I think it's worked. When I first started with this company, there was hardly any rock people at all that even heard of the company.
That's right.
And so the sound is what made everybody change. And when they played the kits like Fred over here or Tommy Lee, when I brought Tommy Lee to DW, it was drums for the sake of drummers, not just for the sake of trying to make money off of drums.
Exactly.
And that's what has kept me here forever.
Well,
There's an interesting timing, because if you look at where the history of the drum industry was back in the early 80s or the late 70s, and you mentioned yourself and Tommy and your ages, I had been aware of great sounding drums that had been made in the past, looking at some of the entrepreneurial drums made when there was a Ludwig, Slingerland, and Rogers, when individual people owned those companies before the business got bigger and those got sold to bigger corporations, and then mass production kind of came into the picture. But when we started out and we're perfecting our craft, and John was out there and has such a good ear and accomplishing what all these artists needed for tuning with Chad's kit, with Zappa, with, I got to tell the Zappa story, remind me in a minute. It kind of became obvious that there was a need for somebody to fill a void that was happening in the industry, because at that point foreign companies came in and they were trying to dominate the industry by making efficient, good quality, inexpensive drums the best they could. And I applauded that always, because we want to get people to buy any kind of a drum set they can, just to get started. But at the beginning, it was more about us, trying to see how we could fill that void back in the early day. And on the tuning side, Zappa calls you one day. Got to tell the Zappa story quickly.
Okay, I'll try and make this as fast as I can, because there's other people here that I want to talk to. But I was on the road with Chad, and this was in the summer of 1982. And we go to Europe, and we take this recording truck with us. So everything you did was recorded. I mean, setting up the drums, the recording, tuning up, recording rehearsals, recording sound checks, recording the show, after the show, everything was recorded. So there's this great big truck, and I was the low man on the totem pole, and in the road crew, and I'm trying to get along with everybody and do my thing, and so we were in, I think it was Helsinki, Finland, and they guys had goofed around with this song called Whippin' Post, in a rehearsal or something, and some guy says, "Hey, play Whippin' Post," and so they actually pull it off and they play Whippin' Post. Well, man, it was so good. I mean, it's like you were inside this song, and Bobby Martin was getting down with this thing, and the band was right, and Frank was smiling, and so we played it every night after that. Whippin' Post, Allman Brothers. So we're going all over the place, and it rained everywhere we went, and so I was trying to be a helpful guy, and I see this trailer that's kind of empty, and guys are taking a break, so I figured I'm going to put this case, it was a pretty heavy case, right up on those furry cases up in the dance floor of this trailer. So I grab this thing, it's heavy, and I go running up this aluminum ramp, get it up there, and I flip it on its head on top of these furry cases. And I get my collar of my shirt with this great big guy, and his name was Al Santos. And he had this hairiest like a raccoon. And he had the finger out, and he was pointing at me, and man, was he mad. And he goes, "Do you know what you just did?" And I said, "Al, I'm just trying to help." So he goes, well, he pulls that case out, and I said, "Jesus Christ, what's the matter with you?" And he goes, "Those furry cases right there, that's all of our recording tape for the entire tour. This case you put on it was spare speakers, magnets." So I said, "Okay, that'll never happen again." So anyway, time goes by, all kinds of things happened, but we got through it. It was at the end of the tour. It was kind of an amazing tour. And you get home, and as a road guy, when those wheels hit the runway, you're out of a gig. So I was living in Santa Monica at the time.
Back at Drum Work.
But I was living in Santa Monica.
Yeah, right.
But I was having to go back into work because it was a school night. It was a Tuesday night. I'll never forget this. And it was 11 o'clock at night, and the phone rings, and it's Frank. It's Zappa. And I'm going, "Frank," and he goes, "Where are you?" I said, "Well, I'm at my apartment." And he says, "I need to see you." So I'm going, well, it's Tuesday night. It's 11 o'clock. I got to go to DW in the morning, you know? And so he says, you know I work all night. I need to see you, please. So I get in my car and I crank her over and I'm driving up to Frank's house off Woodrow Wilson. And I'm going up there and my hands start to sweat. And I'm thinking, it's been about a month since we got off the road. So he's had time to listen to these tapes. I'm a effing dead man, you know? So I drive up there and I'm gonna die. So I get there and I park the car and I sit in the car for a minute going, I'm hyperventilating. So I get out, walk up to the front of his house, and I go to hit the front door to knock, and he opens it and he goes, "What took you so long?" And I said, "Well, you know, we ran out of gas, a flat tire, and all that stuff." So he says, "Come on, I want up in the studio." So I follow him up this staircase that goes like this, and it's like, I'm in my twisted mind, I'm going, this is the gallows, where you put the rope around your neck, and this is where your head gonna wind up. So I get up there, and I'm really nervous, and he goes, "I want you to sit in my chair." And he had this really comfy, easy chair, in the middle of all these machines and a huge console and all these speakers. And anyway, so he says, "Would you like a beverage?" I go, "Yeah." And I don't really drink a lot of beer, but I said, "How about a beer?" And he goes, "Here's a beer." And I'm going, what did I do? What did I do? So he turns on this thing and it's whipping post. And it's like, and Bobby Martin's getting down and Vi's playing and Frank's playing. The band was screaming good. It was like you're inside the music. And it was loud too, your hair's blowing. And I'm sitting there and so it finally comes to an end. And Bobby gets to that, sometimes I feel, like he's so full and it's good. And he turns it off. I'm going, wow, man, that's just amazing. He says, "Okay, did you hear the edits?" I go, "No, I actually didn't." And he goes, "Well, that went from, like, I'm just gonna make up a couple of places because I was out of my mind, terrified." He says it started in London, went to Paris, went to Rome, back to London, to Metz. You didn't hear any of those edits. And I go, "My God, Chad Wackerman's time is amazing." And he goes, "Yes, Chad's time is amazing. And so is the way you tune those drums night after night." And I went, I said, "Is that why I'm here?" He says, "That's why you're here." It was amazing because, he played and worked with a lot of great artists, with Jonathan and all these people, but to get that validation from Frank Zappa that was something. That was big for me. That was big for me.
And then a quick story. Neil Peart calls, and first we hear he's looking to try some other drums, so we get him a drum kit, and shorten the story, I think 3 or 4 months or 4 or 5 months go by. We don't hear anything. We try and find out if he's played them or had a chance to, and don't hear anything again. A few more months go by, and then we get, he hasn't had a chance to, but he's going to be soon, and a few more months go by. So at this point, we're figuring it's,
ain't happening.
He's moving on. It ain't happening. And all through that time, the person you were talking to was adamant that you will be talking to management. You won't be talking to Neil. Neil doesn't talk directly. You'll be talking to the management when the decision comes up. So we'll let you know when things are going, how they're going. So John then comes into my office and says, "Guess who I just talked with for an hour?" I said, "Who?" He said, "Neil Peart." I said, "Wow, that's great." Yeah, he said, we talked about his drum set, and he has a problem off of his hi-hat because he has 2 16s. I told him he needs a 15 over there. That's what he's doing wrong. I said, "He called you for the first time, and the first thing you do is tell him he's doing something wrong." He said, "Well, I had to tell him that." And if Neil were telling the story, he said that solved the problem for me at that point. So trust is a big part of the picture, right?
As Keltner had talked to George Harrison, apparently. And so I'm at the office. We're working. doing everything, and all of a sudden our receptionist goes, there's a George Harrison on the phone. Right. So I instead of tell him, I'll call him, whatever. And I say, well, I better go pick it up. And I'm saying, in my mind, this can't be George Harrison. He goes, John, it's George Harrison. I'm going, he says, I hope it's okay. Kelton has said I could call. And I'm going, well, it's a real honor to speak to you, George. This is fantastic. And he goes, yeah, so I'm looking to get a drum kit. And I go, all right. And I bet, fine, whatever Jim wants, whatever you want. And he goes, yeah, well, here's what I want. I want it to look like a bunch of balloons, all different colors, And I'm going, I'm not doing that. Why not? And I said, because I don't think that'll look good. And I, Jesus. And then, so it occurs to me, an honor to speak to George Harrison, and now I'm arguing with George. But we worked it out. It turned into a great drum kit, and I think you played that kit at his house, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it was like it kind of matched his house at that point. It was a very gothic kind of drum kit.
Yeah.
And I think you took a picture of it with him, and you told me all about it. I said, great. That'll be a picture I want to put on the wall. He said, no, well, I lost the camera. So I never saw it, but.
Back in those days when they had film.
What you got?
Back in 2016, I was doing a tour, and so I called John, and he said, well, why don't you come out? I said, okay. So I drive out to DW, and we're checking out different colors and woods and stuff. And then you said, well, come on in here. I want you to check these drums out. And it was a stainless steel kit.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And so I'm like, oh, wow. I didn't know. I thought it was chrome over wood.
Yeah, right.
And so I hit the drums, and it sounded great. And I'm like, wow, this is good. So I took it out. So this big kit, take it out, and playing with Yes. And we start rehearsing. And Rick Wakeman comes over to me, and he goes, wow, man. A kit that looks like that usually sounds like fucking shit. And he goes, it sounds great.
Yeah, right. Thanks for that.
By the way, a guy that's held on to a kit for the longest time was Kelly Kagi. I was at his house, and I'm like, how old is that kit? And it was like 85 or something crazy.
Between him and Tom Morris. Tom, do you still have that original kit?
Yes, I do. It's kind of weird being in this room because I realized, like, coming here, I don't know many of these guys. It's going to be, but then I realized the first tour I did, once my band got signed, I opened my band, Little Caesar. We toured with Jane's Addiction and got to watch them play. And I used to watch Steven play coming up at all the clubs, and he's like phenomenal. I've done a lot of touring with Pat next to me from Junkyard. And Jimmy referenced a drum painter who skipped town, and I've gotten a sinking feeling that that guy, well, I think I know who it is. I paid $400 for a snare drum 30 years ago, and I just realized that I never got it. But anyway, I remember I have like pretty bad OCD, so when my band finally got signed in the late 80s, you know, as all bands did during that period, the drummers, you know, it was like pretty much a given that you would get your drum endorsement and all that together. And I didn't want to play the American drums because they declined so bad, and I just obsessed. But the other thing, like, I'm obsessed with the color green, which just seemed to come up quite a bit here. And it could only be green drums. And so, you know, I knew a little bit about DW, and I liked that it was American, and it was like nobody else was playing them. And I remember coming out to Newbury Park and then, you know, meeting John, and I didn't realize it was going to be such a scholastic event because I was so afraid as he was going through like all the, you know, like I was worried that he was going to start like quizzing me after the thing. I mean, this was not what I expected. You did. But I remember I was adamant that I wanted like traditional sized drums because those were the drums I'd always played. I had a Slingerland set. That was my first kit. But I wanted the traditional sizes. I did not like the power toms, and we had kind of agreed I was going to have like, you know, it was going to be an 8x12, a 10x14, and then when we got down to the floor tom, at that time you wouldn't make square drums, I remember, and the 16x16 was the traditional.
Right.
And I said I want to, and said, well, you know, you were not making them at that point, so he said, well, have you ever tried a 14x16? He said, no, and I kind of trusted you with that, but then I was pretty stuck on I had to have a 14x24, and then I remember you said, Tom, is it really more important to you to have the drum look a certain way, or would you prefer it to sound better? And I remember I just sort of felt like, yeah, I'm not gonna win this fight. So I got my 16x24, and you're right. You've never steered me wrong. I got my green kit, but I also remember you were okay with green, but you will not do turquoise.
That holds true today.
That's true. I asked for so long.
I still got my colorful.
Oh yeah, the infamous.
And that, I don't know, that thing created a name for itself because we made that thing appear on the PBS show, and they just started airing that thing every single year. Prince discovered from that show.
Wow.
And that,
No,
and it was
we
just one
forgot
of those
that
things
one.
when we came to the factory, me and my pops, and of course the infamous John Good dab on the shells, you know, like perfect pitch like my dad. And it's like we went through the whole motion, and I think what really captivated me, what made me feel like this company's not only going to be something amazing and special, was just the quality and the sound that you guys brought to every shell, to every drum kit. And I was with Remo at the time, and they were tampering with like acoustic conch shells, so definitely there was like a different sound, but I felt like coming here, it felt like that's the way the drum should sound.
Wow.
And what helped all of that was you guys also being like that family feeling that you guys have. And later down the line, and of course the late great Jim Chapin, he's always going to be very dear in my heart.
Me
How
too.
you and your wife Esther
Thank you.
would just take care of him like that, and it's just that family, that energy that you guys bring, and this is all a testament here of all of us being here.
Oh.
You know, we're all very grateful for
Well,
you guys.
thank you very much.
We'll be winding up here, but as you mentioned names, it just reminds me of stories. The PAS show was in LA one year, way back in the day. It would have been in the early 80s. And early 90s, was it? I was there and was sitting at McDonald's at a booth by myself grabbing a burger, and Jim Chapin was behind me at the booth with some other gentlemen. And they said, "You should be doing something here, Jim." He says, "Well, you have to have sponsors in order to do something. I don't have any sponsors." So I immediately turned around from my booth and I said, "Yes, you do now." We sponsored him the next year because drum companies would look at him as, who's Jim Chapin? You know, he wrote a book. He's, you know, an older jazz guy. But
Yeah.
one of the things that I think, you know, John and I have always looked at it from the standpoint of look at the quality of the people that are here. They're all great players. They've all sustained in their careers. And that's when you build a company, that's that foundation that that we needed to have back in those days. And you made it possible for us to launch it and kind of keep it going. In the 80s, we were barely making drums. I mean, we had maybe 2 or 3 dealers. We were selling them to individuals. We had a couple stores. We made a blue kit in the early 80s, a bright blue kit. And I get a call from AJ's, which was down in, I think, Florida. Music store. He was one of the first guys to take our kits. And he had sold it to somebody, and it got stolen. The guy had it ripped off out of a club. And a couple months later, I get a call from AJ, and he says, "Guy just came in here, and he said he saw a guy playing a DW kit about 2 hours away at this club. Have you made any other blue kits?" I said, "No, only one." He says, "Okay, that's all I need to know." So there's an advantage to being small back in the early days too. But I don't even know how to thank all these people for
Well-
supporting us through all these years.
We need to thank you, brother.
Can I say one thing? One thing?
Yeah.
Because another name is Louis Garcia. How about a shout for our Louis?
Hey, Dave Owens back there.
Yeah, we gotta hear.
You know, this is somebody who works consistently all the time. He's never stopped. He's one of the most polite persons I know, and he comes out periodically, checks on everything, everybody, and the best Christmas cards. Best Christmas cards. One of the most thoughtful people, and that's the kind of fabric that we have around us that I think makes me very, very thankful.
Thing that's so cool is I look around and there isn't one person in this room that I wouldn't want to take a drum lesson from, except for Peter. I take piano lessons.
Exactly true.
Just for me, it's more of a thank you because, as you know, I'm no more as a percussionist, but
Yes.
I became kind of like an emergency drummer. I would be on a gig, and when I was with Frankie Valli, for example, the father of the drummer died, and he said, Richie, can you play drums? We got to finish this show. So I would just jump in there and play, and it happened the same with Tony Orlando and stuff. And I had to play whatever kids were there. And what I would do for security would be put percussion on the side of the drums, that if I messed up on the drums, I'd go to the Congress or timbales or something to cover. But anyway, when I got the gig with John Denver, he wanted a drummer percussionist, and also I was doing a Paul Rodriguez TV show. I didn't have any drums. And I came to you and you gave me 2 kits. You said, here's one for the show and here's one for you for the TV show.
Well,
And thank you for that.
Richie, thank you, man.
I have to ask you, John, what do you do to those bass drums, man? The bass drums sound so good everywhere. It's incredible because, you know, and I use a big hole in the front, which you hate. But I always get such a great sound. The DW kick drums everywhere. I think everybody can agree.
Yeah.
The kick drums are special. I mean, if I put my setup on any other drum, it's like totally dead.
We have our
Because
secrets.
it's so, no, but your kick drums are incredible.
Well, John says it's the drums. I say it's the pedal that makes the sound. Between the two of us, we work it out.
That's great.
I'd like to say that I think I speak for all of us when I say you guys could have quit like 10 years ago and you'd already raised the bar to a point where you raised the entire drum making industry. I mean, everybody said to look at you guys, keep up with you guys, and as a result, everybody has benefited, including those that are other guys, you know.
Yeah, they always have to play catch up.
But the thing about you guys is that you constantly, you're not content to sit back and rest on your laurels. You're always pushing the envelope, and you're so damn creative. I mean, it's just incredible.
Thank you, man. That's so sweet. And also, stop by my office because I've got a shell that's going to blow your mind.
If you'll allow me, I've got to say, Mark Cranny took me, I was with another drum company, and then the person that signed me to the drum company didn't work there anymore. And I came out here to LA for a Rick Springfield tour, and it got canceled. And I had all these extra drums of that company, and I took them back to the company and said, I quit, I'm not feeling it. And I ended up doing some sessions with a 60s or 70s, 60s Rogers drum kit, 2 toms, bass drum and snare drum, and like the film Under Siege, if I remember. Anyway, the thing is, some people, well, what Cranny told me was, and hi Mark, what Cranny told me was, these guys are the drummers, are our best friend. They're a drummer's best friend, John Good and Don Lombardi. And that's the thing. Some people aspire to have a gig and keep a gig. Others go farther and aspire for artistic greatness. And you guys, like John and Don, you live and breathe as artists just as much as any of us do at our best. And thank you for that.
Thank you, Billy. Well, you know, Dave Palmer got out of here somewhere. I don't know where he
Went
went.
to the bathroom.
Dave
Take his chair
Palmer,
away.
you know,
You're out.
sometimes people come to you with these paint job ideas, you know, for a drum kit, and some of them can be out there, right? But Palmer always, he says, I want this checkerboard looking thing, and I said, how's that going to work? Or then he wanted, what did he want, Garrison? A Celtic, a tartan, Rod Stewart thing. Anyway, but you know, it never ceases to amuse the heck out of me. It's like what's going to come next? What's interesting and what's cool? Josh, one time with this one, and I'm sorry that we use you.
I've been used before.
You're going to tell one or two stories.
Well, I'm going to tell you about, he shows up to Louis, my painter, with a stack of boarding passes.
That's so great.
Right? And so he says, I want the whole drum set to be boarding passes, so we found a way to do it.
Yeah, and he was able to, you know, there was a few drums that there was some trial and error things because it was, you know, some of them were really, really thin, so you put them on there. Once you put some coating on or some glue, it would soak through it or get too wet and fall off, you know. But, you know, I know it's a pain in the ass, but it was so, you know, even at one point, we talked about maybe doing like a shot, like a silk screen of one where it's easier to just do one piece. But I was like, you know what? These are all boarding passes from gigs that I've flown out to go do. And I would love to have the actual physical things that I took on and off planes.
And we did it.
To be part of this kit that I play with,
And
you know?
you know, this man
and you guys
does
pull it
not-
off and it's incredible.
This
and
man
I
does
love it.
not fly coach.
Well, no, there's plenty of those. But you know what I got to, Steve and I have been laughing for a while now about whether we tell the story or not, and the green, another time with the green drums.
More green drums.
Remember the two-tone green drums?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
You got to
Go,
tell the
baby.
story now.
Okay. Well, you know, with all the experimenting and stuff and great stuff you guys do, you know, sometimes things when someone has a vision of the way they want something to come out, sometimes it, you know, it usually does come out great, and sometimes it's, you know, a little bit off the mark. And basically, I come up one day to basically, I think, have lunch or like maybe trade in a pedal or two or something. And I come into your office, John, and you're on the phone, and there's a bunch of beautiful drums in his office, and he's going, one second. And I walk over to this two-tone green drum kit. I go, my God, I'm thinking, this thing is so cool looking. It's this two-tone green. Every drum is the same two color greens, but each one's a different design, slightly, right? And I'm going, and it's gold hardware, right? But this two-tone green thing with the gold hardware, and I'm sitting behind him just going, wow, this is so cool. And you're going, hold on one second. And you get off the phone, you go, do you like those drums? I go, yeah, these drums are great. And you go, you might be the only guy on the roster that'll play drums this ugly. I go, what are you talking about? And you go, we made them for Stephen Perkins, but you know, he had this other vision and we were working on it for a while. They didn't come out quite right. Do you want them? I'm like, hell yeah, I want them.
I was seeing that day because Stephen had like described how he wants to get, and he was getting kind of cosmic about the whole thing. It's like a beach, you know, and an island, and so I'm kind of waving along with him. So I draw this thing out, and Louis paints it, and we get it all put together, and he comes to go pick them up, and everybody's got these big smiles, and we open them up and show it to him, and he goes, oh, it's awful.
I still regret that moment. But you know, I went to a studio in Studio City. I walk in, there they are. They're there. I got to play them about 6 months ago.
I have a friend who owns a studio, Studio City, that I work at with him all the time. And he for years had this old beat up black pearl kit, right? And you know, not the finished black pearl, but a black pearl drum set. And I find that I do so much work at this place. I said, man, let me bring some of my drums up here so they sound great when I come up here to do sessions. And he's a real close friend. And he said, and other drummers that come through here, they can use them instead of you know, having to lug their own stuff in. And they can, you know, have a chance to play them. And all the time, like Steven said, he did a session there recently and saw them there.
I finally got
I've got
to
other
play
drummer
them.
friends that leave me notes on the heads. But you know, they get a hell of a lot of use.
Wow.
Studio
I
City
remember
sound.
your assistant, Cindy, at the time, I was heartbroken, and she actually she held me. She knew I was hurt.
Oh.
I didn't know what to do because I wanted more drums, like we all do. You know, more drums.
And I wasn't due for a kit, but I'm looking at these drums going, God, these drums are great. I might have gotten a kit 6 months prior, and I was just expecting to have lunch. You know, and you're like, do you want these drums? Going, oh my God. It was like Christmas morning, man. I pulled the station wagon around back, and we loaded them up, and another
lived
score.
Another day. That's great. That's
So
fantastic.
everybody knows that the shells sound great. So in the early days, after we did our first album on A&M, the drums sounded great, and I thought, wow, John, have you ever made concert toms? John looked at me and said, get out of here. So of course I did, and I went back and I took all the bottom hardware off, all the drums, recorded our second album, and I used them. If you look at the US Festival, I used them there. John didn't talk to me for like about 2 years. I put him back, and I go, they're back. So anyway, the shells do sound great.
They do. Thank you, man.
I think we know one thing for sure. It is, like us, old DW drums just get better with time, right? We're going to go get a group shot out there, and then we're going to have a great lunch.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.